I think our world's built on wanting to control others and tell others how to be and program others to make ourselves comfortable. And oftentimes we focus on that. We're really taught and programmed to focus on the external. And in a way, I could get a little bit deeper into this. The external and internal are actually the same. But for simplicity's sake, you know, we got to come internal and, like you said, say, okay, am I blaming? Am I complaining? Am I hiding? And this will be a habit or an attitude or behavior, a belief system of somebody's, of why they keep repeating that.
Please welcome my guest, Ann Shivas. She has a degree in teaching, osteopathy, and a PhD. We're going to talk about epigenetics. We're going to talk about how behavior affects all of us, how we can make change, and how we all have our choices. So if you're ready, let's get into it. Stress is a big deal, right? I mean, it affects all of us at some point in time.
Yeah, and I use the word stress because it's relatable. And so after 11 years being in clinical, Chuck, it's like everyone comes in and it's like the most popular word to use. I am so stressed out. And I always try to go, okay, why do you have pain? Or, you know, why do you have a mental health problem? Or why are you developing this disease? And we, in my clinical setting, we really try to give the power back to the patient and saying like, well, we want to empower you so you don't keep repeating the same cycle, repeating the same pattern of living. And so oftentimes we ask them quite a few questions, right? Like, what's going on in your life? What's going on in the family? What's going on in your workplace? And we really try to paint a picture in our clinical notes around what their environment looks like, which we'll probably talk about today. And through that environment, we try to get them to be like, okay, well, you know, what's the most stressful part? And that word stress is really meaning something they just don't want anymore. They just,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
right.
And so on a Friday, let's all really like sit down and go internal and be like, what do we not want anymore? And then also, what do we actually really want for ourselves? What kind of life do we want for ourselves? And I can paint a picture for you if you want around what everyone does really want. Because I've made lists over the past few years. And naturally it comes down to health. They really want their health back. They want their freedom. Okay, so, you know, freedom of choice, freedom of living, freedom to, you know, do whatever they want to do. And generally they want to make a difference of some sort in people's lives, like have their purpose, understand their purpose and what kind of difference they're contributing. I do think humans do want to contribute, but in how they want to contribute is always the big question. Yeah. And so when we break it down into those three things, it sounds really simple, right? And then you put the typical 9 to 5 over top of it, and it's maybe not conducive to everybody's environment at the end of the day, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. And I know that so many of us, we think about those things and that's what we wish. But that's the one thing we do is we think about it, we think about it, we think about it, but we never do anything about it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, people almost get to a point, it seems like, where they're forced to do something about it. And I can even share my personal story on that. But it's almost like whatever God or universe or spirit you believe in, it's like they'll stop you in your tracks. You'll get a message, and the message you probably won't really love. Let's be honest. And that's your time to live or die, so to speak. You can choose, it's your fork in the road. You know, you can choose to go and change something about yourself and live this completely fulfilling life, or learn how to go down that path. Or, you know, you can come back and just keep doing what you're doing. And from what I've seen in clinical, as an osteopath, like, you know, people are going on painkillers, they're going on meds and so on. And I actually want to be clear. It's not that I'm against that. It's like, but it's blanketing the issue. And I'm okay with saying that because 90% of the time it's actually blanketing the issue, and people have to go inward and say, okay, well, actually, what do I need to change in my lifestyle? What do I need to learn about myself? So I don't need to be so codependent on the medical system for the rest of my life. Because I mean, I hear it, you know, point blank from the patients. They're like, I don't want to be on this for the rest of my life. How do I get off it? And that's usually why they come and see me. And some people maybe do want to be on it, and that's their choice. That's fine. But the majority of people that come to me is like, I need to make a change. I need to get off this. I want to have a fulfilling life. I want my health back. These kind of things.
Is that part of like a mind shift, changing your mind?
Yeah, well, let's talk about the word epigenetics, okay? Yeah,
Yes.
so this word is a trending word right now. It has to do with DNA. Everyone's talking about hacking your DNA. You've probably heard it. Or even like biohacking. Like these are all these popular words. And hey, look, some of it is absolutely amazing, but this comes down to something a bit deeper than all of your DNA and all your biohacking. And I know because just to paint you a little picture, when I was in clinical, I was like, okay, people are coming back for the same pain and the same thing over and over again. And I was like, what am I missing here? And in full disclosure, I'm going back for my stuff for the same thing and the same patterns as well. And like, what am I missing here? So speaking from a person who used to play in the pro soccer world and 2 knee surgeries and chronic fatigue, and I just kept going down the chronic fatigue area. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I think it's important to share a personal story. It's relatable in a way because it's like, well, I've been there and now I can understand what really people are going through. So just to share my personal story a bit is, everything relates back to a time in your life where you decided that this is my perspective of life. I'm going to call it someone's deepest story. Okay. The deepest story that you like to live. And so let's walk ourselves back in life a little bit, and I'll share a little bit of mine. And I don't know, Chuck, maybe you can discover yours today with me if you're open to it. But it's up to you. Not to put you on the spot, hey.
I'm open to
Oh,
discoveries.
good. Okay. So, we go back and you look at your childhood, and, all of the people that are in psychology talk about this often. And it's like, what are your belief systems that you established based on your environment that you believe about yourself? And you're going to keep living that over and over and over again. For example, and this is epigenetics to the key. So what do I believe about myself that I'm going to keep repeating over and over again? If I believe that I need to, I'll take food, for example, because we see this a lot, but I believe I self-sabotage myself with food when I'm upset. What might that lead to? Like overeating, eating the wrong foods for yourself, just to feel some comfort when we don't know how to deal with what situation's in front of us, right? So
Hmm.
if we had a household where, and this isn't to bash any parents just do their best, love all your parents, okay? They gave you life. If you're still here, they gave you life. So you got to love them. Call your mom and dad and tell them you love them today. Um, and so it's not about bashing your parents or blaming them. They knew what they knew at that time. And it's your job, to go within yourself and say, okay, actually, this is the belief system I chose to take on. And so if grandma or mom or dad said, oh, you're sad, I'm just going to give you some candy. So every time you're sad, you're programmed to be like, okay, I'm going to go for the candy. I'm going to go for the chips. I'm going to go for all the food that I know I shouldn't even be buying off the counters, just to soothe myself, right? And then so what happens later on in life? Inflammatory responses, autoimmune disease, because there's been a pattern of a person since they were younger of going for that food all the time, and they might not even recognize it. Sometimes they'll come into the clinic and say, gosh, I eat healthy, Ann. I'm like, really? And so a big part when I start actually with individual coaching is saying, actually, we're going to create a food diary together, and I want to just see what you eat in the last week. And oftentimes what their perception of healthy is based on what they're actually doing isn't really matching, and it's not their fault, they just don't know. So they're, oh yeah, I eat all my vegetables and stuff. And there's like, 1 serving of vegetables a day. Yeah.
You're reading my diary, aren't
Am
you?
I? Oh, okay. Well then, hey, look. And so it's not really about the food per se. Like, yes, we need to nurture ourselves, but it's the pattern behind why they keep choosing to self-sabotage themselves and not nurture themselves. That's when I see often. Okay, so, on the flip side of that, with the coaching I do, we go into getting them on the proper supplementation, getting them eating the foods that they need to eat for their body type. And we can even go in now with some DNA testing and say, okay, they need more omegas in their diet, and we can teach them that. And so that's just the beauty of the technology that we have today. But, and sharing my personal story along that, it was, I love my parents deeply, but I grew up in a family of teachers. And so what do teachers do? You got to get perfect on your report cards, right? And so when I write my bios, right, for podcasts, I'm always like, oh gosh, it's like everyone will be, and you're the A-type personality. And I was like, well, no, I was actually trying to prove myself to my parents my whole life to receive love, because I would get love if I did really well on things, right? And if I didn't do well, I wouldn't receive that love. And naturally, my underlying story is like, I'm not actually really lovable, right? And so I was looking to go through life in ways and express myself in ways to be seen, to be heard, to feel loved. And it wasn't really me. It was me trying to just get what my unmet needs were as a kid, right? So, I go through life and jump into the pro soccer world, and I end up, I don't even know how many degrees I have at this moment, but like, going through school and getting all these degrees, and the studies were fantastic. Don't get me wrong. It's brought me to where I'm here today, but the underlying part of it was like, I'm not lovable, and life is so difficult because I can't even see or experience love. So the basis of it is everything was going to be on that building block, right? And so, I had built my life on that until I actually really got to know, okay, I'm expressing myself in that way, and everything I'm doing is not giving me love at all. And I was searching and searching and searching for it. It's kind of an unconscious pattern, to be honest. And that's how I was expressing myself, based on how I programmed myself as a child. And that is the underlying part of epigenetics. And I've given two examples, one on a more kind of unseen front, if you will, around the love. So it's a behavioral. And then another one still around behavioral, but we could see it through food. And we could go on and on about different patterns that people carry and express that's going to benefit them or not. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. But I do have a question about this, because when is it a habit and not a habit? I know they're both kind of behavioral, what we were talking about now with epigenetics, and reaching for that food because of something that I'll just say a traumatic incident or whatever it might have been in the past. But when is it, and how do we differentiate it from a habit? Because I'm thinking about myself now as we're talking about food and bad behaviors, which I believe it wasn't it's out of habit what I do. Come 1 a.m. I'm watching my Netflix or whatever, and I'm going, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go grab that bag of chips and dip or whatever it might be, and I will eat half a family-sized bag and the full 16-ounce thing of dip. But I look at it as, for me, it's a habit and not anything caused by something in the past. Am I avoiding something?
Maybe. We'd have to dive into it. But like a habit, and I'd ask you, how often are you doing this? Is it like once a year, or is this once a month, or is this once a week? Like,
for me?
Yeah.
We're talking now about me?
Yeah.
4 days a week.
Okay.
Probably.
Yeah.
On the minimum.
Okay.
On the minimum.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because, habit is something that we repeat over and over and over again, right? And so what we'd want to discover a little bit is like, is there something missing in your daily diet, right? That you're still, lurking for food that to fill and satisfy your need for nutrients in the body, or is there something, at 1 a.m., I'm not saying there's 1 a.m. trends in your life, but is there something going on at 1 a.m. in your mind where, you need to self-soothe, right? And that could be a way of soothing yourself. And so it's worth you digging into your own story. And we don't need to get into that on the podcast. We can if you want, but I appreciate you sharing.
Oh, doctor, I feel this now.
It's like, okay, this is done. but it's worth, yeah, diving in and saying, okay, well, first of all, do I want to keep this habit? Yes or no? Right?
Mm-hmm.
People have to make a decision. And then secondly, it's like, okay, well, where did I start this? And was there an event around that? So that's a really good way to dive into ourselves. And this is a great example. Thanks for sharing this, because a lot of people can use this example when they're listening and being like, oh my gosh, actually, I started doing the chips and dip thing in university when I was stressed out, and I was staying up to one, and I was studying, and I can actually recreate that same stress in my body and my mind of when I was, going through college or university, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
example, or I started this when I was in an unhealthy relationship, or I started this, as a kid. Like, I don't know the answer, but it's like, go back and rediscover where you developed that habit, and see what was going on in your life at that time. I bet you there'll be something there.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this because I know that so many people are going to be able to relate. And like I said, you need to go back and find that, I'll say, the history and the story. And you are causing me to think back. When did I start this? I know I've been doing it for many, many, many years. I'm talking a long time. But I'm also thinking about another situation where this could possibly be, say, fear of flying or things like that. Does this fall into this category? Um, so I have gone back and traced my history of why I never was afraid until this one point in time. And then I realized that's what it was. So I'm glad you're saying that so people know they need to go back and think, you know, could it have been this event, that event?
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes, and I think the beauty of what humans can do is we can go back and actually reprogram ourselves. And so,
Mhm.
just to bring up that word epigenetics again, epi means above and around, okay, around your body, and genetics is you. So, it's how you're choosing to express yourself in that environment, right? And so, for example, if the chips and dip come in every day for every meal, you might express something in your body eventually that you don't want, right? Maybe like I don't know. I don't want to say a disease because I don't wish that on anybody, but something that you don't really want. Maybe some digestive issue. Let's make it light. Right? Okay. And then you get the digestive issue, and you have no energy and so on. And it's like, gosh, I need to make a change. Like, your body will tell you you need to make a change, right?
Yeah.
But what's to say, if we don't go back and revisit where we started it in the first place, that this person doesn't go into something else? So all of a sudden they're like, okay, I need to get fit. And then they get super obsessed with going to the gym and that becomes the obsession. And it's like, then you overtrain, you get burnout. So I've seen people do this whole pendulum swing of like, well, I'm going to do this now. And so actually behind all of that is the habit of like, okay, hang on a second. There's an addiction here. Right. And naturally everyone will have that based on their life experiences and how they've programmed themselves to express themselves in that environment. So getting back to that first story, that first belief story, like, I was sharing mine about like life's difficult, life's hard, there's all these barriers in my way that I have to achieve to be loved. And that really wasn't that, it wasn't the truth, but it was my truth at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
um my parents loved me in the way that they did, and my grandmother and so on, but it's like, I wanted more love, and so on and so forth. So it's all about how we decide to express ourselves in the environment. And so the behavior and the habit and the emotion and the attitude of life will all come out based on how we've programmed ourselves to express. And so we're talking more about behaviors, but in your case, and when we talk about food and flying and things like that, it does come into our regular days of choices that we're going to make in each
Yeah.
moment, right? So, do I take the flight or not? Am I going to sweat on the whole flight or not?
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
It, one of the things that you just mentioned, that it's your truth. It may not be the truth, but it's your truth. I think that sometimes people have to be careful. I'm not a clinical, well, I'm not a clinician. I'm not a doctor. I'm not anything. I'm not the PhD scientist like you, but I will say that people tend to all of a sudden they might realize, and then they do the blame game.
Hmm.
It all of a sudden it shifts, and they're blaming it's that person's fault because of it's that thing because of, rather than realizing that that may not be the truth. And like you said, it is your truth, but don't all of a sudden make it into something else and blame. Am I going in the wrong direction thinking about
Not
this?
at all. Not at all. I love that you said that. There's, a quote, and it's got to be by someone in the East. I can't remember who, but it's basically like if you want to see change in the world, you have to change yourself first.
Michael Jackson said that.
Did he?
Something in one of his songs, I
I
think.
love, yeah, man
The
in the
man in the
mirror,
mirror.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah, yes, true. Yeah, and yeah, good old MJ. I love him. Great music. And so, yeah, really it comes down into the fact that, like, I think our world's built on wanting to control others and tell others how to be and program others to make ourselves comfortable. And oftentimes we focus on that. We're really taught and programmed to focus on the external. And in a way, I could get a little bit deeper into this. The external and internal are actually the same. But for simplicity's sake, you know, we got to come internal and, like you said, say, okay, am I blaming? Am I complaining? Am I hiding? And this will be a habit, or an attitude or behavior, a belief system of somebody's, of why they keep repeating that. And so, let's say you get angry. I can't tell you, don't get angry at me. Instead, I could go in and actually discover and help you of why you're angry. So, and even if you're angry at me, it's not my anger. We might react in anger, and if I react in anger too, that's mine. Right? And that's mine to deal with. But then, like, what's the deeper conversation of the anger, of the and that comes into that self healing component. I like calling it self transformation rather than healing, because the healing world's, there's everything in there, and some of it works and some of it doesn't, and that's okay. But it comes down to, like, actually wanting to transform yourself. And people need to know, like, a cell, getting a little bit nerdy here, a cell regenerates itself. So what's to say you can't regenerate yourself? You can't, you can regenerate your behaviors, you can regenerate your thoughts, your attitudes, and so on. You don't have to keep the same blame game going your whole life. You can if you want, but I don't think it'll lead to a very fulfilling, happy life, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely makes sense. And there are so many people, well, people fall on both sides. Those who know but continue those um, damaging habits or damaging behaviors and continually complain.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have the others, like you say, that come to the finalization of realization and saying, I need to make that that shift, that change. But this is where you are the founder of LifeLift, correct?
Yes, yes.
So people can go to Live. Am I saying
LifeLift.live.
dot
Yeah,
live? Yeah,
tongue
the dot live
twister.
throws me out. It is LifeLift.live, because you have these different modules, you have all these courses, you have a lot of things where it can help each and every one of us with these. Again, I'm just going to call it issue now, with these issues or situations.
Yeah, patterns of living. Yes.
Yeah. And we all go through this. Some people might not relate to exactly what we're talking about, but I think everything we're saying is relatable.
Totally. Yeah. And I actually want to dive deeper into what's on the other side of the patterns too, because everyone thinks it's like a
Yes.
dark, gloomy life. And oh my gosh, I've created all these patterns. And if I don't change them, my life's, going to be awful, and so on and so forth. So I want to flip on the other side. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. We do have, oh gosh, I have some free webinars going on. I do take on, I only take on 6 clients at a time now. Yeah, and I take them on their self-transformation journey. That's usually around 90 days, depending on where they're starting, if we have to clean up the diet and so on. And we have to look at a person holistically. So when I first started, I only used to do like diet. And now I'm like, okay, diet, exercise, we want to work through someone's patterns. and bringing them actually to their purpose is what I do in the coaching. And for those who can't, afford the one-on-one coaching, we do workshop days, which is really fun. So they get a little taste of, how people are built in this world, and they get a taste of themselves, right? And so they come in and they're like, okay, I'm ready to know myself. I'm ready to learn about my needs. I'm ready to learn actually about how to better take care of myself and live in a way that's totally conducive to me. And oftentimes in there too, I get, lovely nurturing mothers who are like, how can I do better for my kids? And I get CEOs in there being like, hey, actually, how can we create a better business environment for all of our employees? So it's really blossomed into just, everyone on the planet's really coming in. I don't have one kind of niche. Everyone's coming in and giving their insights and so on. So that workshop day is really fun. We have one on the end of November 23rd, that people are welcome to come into, and they'll learn a heck of a lot about themselves. And it's not near Black Friday, just for all the Americans. I love I'm going Black Friday shopping, so it's not near Black Friday. I think it's a week after that. But yeah, on the other side of that, Chuck, we talk about patterns, and people are like, oh my gosh, I've been living this, my whole life. That's so sad. Like, I've been wasting my life. And it's like, well, no, actually, you kind of needed all these learnings coming up to now. You don't need to carry them forward for yourself. But what we do want to talk about is the fact that in genetics, if we walk down the street, and I'd love for everyone to do this, we walk down the street, you're never going to see two people who look the same unless they're twins, right? And let's say you do see twins, because I always get the naysayer, and there's twins. And I'm like, yes, there's twins. But you start talking to those twins about their experiences, even as kids, they'll still perceive the world differently. They still have their own way of expressing, meaning that every single person on this planet has their own purpose, their own coded purpose. So let's take you, for example. Chuck's gone through his life, right? And he's had his own experiences, and now you're running these amazing podcasts, right? And so your experiences of how you perceive the world, no one else will have those experiences. And so for me, what it did is it took out competition, actually, because nobody, and coming from like being an ex-pro athlete, I couldn't understand that for a while, but no one will have the exact same purpose for doing what they're doing. Does that make sense? They'll have a different perspective on it. They'll have a different reason of why they're showing up to perform or do something. They'll have a reason of what they want to give. And so on this planet, what I couldn't understand is like, why do people need to like control others? Why not talk about our purposes and like learn how to collaborate? This is my big question, because it's like, well, if we all really knew our own purpose and what change we wanted to make, we could come together and collaborate. But then, money comes into it and all this kind of stuff. And for me, I'm like, you want to know what? I'm over that. I'm only collaborating with people who want to share a vision and want to grow something together, because this whole, greed, if you will, and I don't want to call it greed. People have to make money to live and so on, but you can do that by collaborating. And you can do that by, sharing your purpose and outcomes and visions and really creating conducive teams. And when I've gone into corporate and there's teams that aren't working well together, this is what I focus on. Well, why do you want to work here? What's your vision in the company? And we go on and go through everybody's. And then everyone's like, oh, wow, like, they all love the same vision, but their reason for being there was totally different. Right?
Yeah, I can see exactly that, because like you're saying, oh, I want to collaborate, but what's in it for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's, I won't say everybody, but most people, they do want to collaborate. But the bottom line, it comes back to what's in it for me. And then it comes back to the self.
It does. And so I would say to people, let's reframe that question, right? What's in it for us? Mm-hmm. Because naturally, let's say, you and I are on this podcast, right? And we're both giving time into this and energy into this, which is amazing. I really appreciate you having me here. So awesome. But I want what's best for your podcast. And then, what's on it from my side is, there's content that goes out and so on for both of us. And we could talk about that. That's absolutely wonderful. And so when people start to understand, the basis of that collaboration. And okay, and obviously, talking about LifeLift in this podcast, and it's going out to the world, which is amazing, and you're helping me do that. Um, there has to be like a sense of community and help, because what do humans do on this planet, I should say? Like, all that we really do is give and receive. At the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, that's
Yeah.
it. That's really our larger purpose, is giving and receiving. Now, some people love to receive, but in my line of work, there always has to be both, right? There has to be that
Yeah.
balance. And if you put nature on top of this, nature balances itself out as well. And so, if we're top heavy on the giving, that's not going to really feel good. That might look like a people pleaser, right? If we're top heavy on the receiving, someone might be, classified as being greedy, right? Or selfish
Mm-hmm.
or what have you. So that balance is key. And so when I run people through parts of our program, especially the corporate program I run, we actually talk about getting really clear on the needs of the whole team. And the needs on the whole team is important, because it's like, well, hang on, this person's working 30 hours a week and this one's working 10, is supposed to be working 30. Like, there's no bounce there. And so, like, instead of getting angry and reacting, it's like, how can we actually move forward and get everyone working in their environment together where it feels good? And that does take a large conversation sometimes that people love to avoid because they don't know how to have it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so think about what we do on a daily. We think a lot, so our brain's constantly going, and we give and receive a lot. And these two things in the epigenetic world are actually, to me, the most important. What's going on in your own mind and your belief systems and how you're perceiving your world, because you're doing that like every minute of every day. Eating's big, because you probably do it 3 or 4 times a day, right? That's another one. And then interactions, your social circle of how you're expressing yourself in your social circle will, make or break relationships. And this whole world is built on communities and relationships. Yeah,
It is.
it is.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about uh, a word that I like to tell myself if I'm collaborating, which I don't look at it as, well, what's in it for me kind of situation. I tend to like to think that I view things as it'll all even out in the end. Or if I'm working like in a situation with a one-on-one, um, it's mutually beneficial. It might not present itself today or right now for me, but in the end, it is a mutual benefit. Because you were using an example of you and I right now. You are here. This is helping me, but in turn, mentioning
Live.
life is beneficial on your end. So we are mutually helping each other out. It's not what's in it for me,
Yeah.
but it's a mutual benefit. I don't know if that's if
100%. And like, the feeling behind that is important too. Okay. So the energy of the feeling behind that. So if I'm like, yeah, cool, I'm just going to run in and get this done and not give much value and so on. It's like, well, hang on. No, I actually, if I show up with gratitude and like literally the feeling and the thought and the living of gratitude, that's probably one of the most important things. Because if we can't find, I always say, the attitude of gratitude in our days, like, my patients are probably going to listen to this and be like, oh, that's Ann. Because I'm like, where's your attitude of gratitude? I have a little sign in my office that actually says, do you have the attitude of gratitude today? And people laugh at it because they usually
nice.
come in and they're like, no. And it gives everyone a little bit of a reminder of the fact that, like you said, every moment of every day, we can either perceive it as being something that's really difficult or hard, or even, when a relationship breaks up or something, we're like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. This is, crap, whatever. This person's crap. Like, but if you can truly find the gratitude in the situation of like, well, maybe there's something better out there for me. Maybe there's a better match out there for me. Maybe there was actually something I could learn in this situation of choosing the same kind of partner over and over again that keeps ghosting me, for example, right? Like, if we can look into why we keep making those same choices, because naturally it'll be all come back to your own choices. There's
Yeah.
gratitude in that, because in a way, universe, God, whatever you believe in, is supporting you to make a different choice in your living that's going to benefit you more than the one that you're making in this moment. So finding that gratitude and looking deeper into that scenario is actually going to help you express something different in yourself. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm thinking of a funny scenario in my head because I'm going, is there a point that goes beyond, meaning here's this person, oh, hello, oh, such a beautiful day, oh, everything is wonderful, oh, you just kicked me, oh, are you having a bad day? Well, where everything all of a sudden they just, that pendulum has swung to the other side where maybe all of a sudden maybe they're masking something once again. They've gotten to a point where it's good, but now everything is so rosy, or they perceive it that way because now they're masking once again.
Yeah, and so that's where that internal work has to happen. And
Okay.
yeah, and it's like, well, it doesn't have to happen. I always don't force people to, but usually
Yeah.
they'll go down that path when they're feeling ready. And so yeah, even when I go in and do corporate contracts, for example, not everybody's ready to see parts of themselves. And I just have to be okay with that. Would I love to give them all the tools and be like, oh my gosh, you need to go down this path because you're going to live such a purposeful life and I can see everything that you are and you're so talented, and just like, you're just holding yourself back. But, it's sometimes, it's not the place or time for them to go down that road.
Yeah.
So for all the people out there who are, doing all this internal work and feeling in a way maybe a little bit dissatisfied because all your friends and family maybe don't understand, or they're not coming on the journey with you, or they don't get you anymore. My question to these people would be like, how can you uplift, hence LifeLift, how can you uplift, the people around you? What skills can you take and help that person on their path one step towards knowing themselves a little bit better? And over time, it's going to take patience. I've been on that path myself where I'm just like, oh, how do you just not get it, right? But it takes patience. And two, it does come into that person being open. And so what we are, we create around us. Does that make sense? And this comes down
Hmm.
into total genetics. So if
Yes.
it comes into genetics, and then it comes into how we think. So, our body, our mind, and then how we connect with source. And whatever you put out to source, you're going to manifest in your day. It's physics at the end of the day. So if I put out that this world sucks, and I, really strongly feel that, and oh my gosh, the whole world's going to explode, and I'm living in fear and what have you, I'm probably going to create that somehow in my day and explode my own little world, right? My own reality
Yeah.
of some sort. I'll keep manifesting and creating that until I learn my lesson. Okay. It comes down to, forcing how I want to live. So, and if I'm going to force things, I'm probably going to get a lot of force back. If I'm going to self sabotage myself, I'll probably get other people showing me the self sabotage around me. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, well, that I've always felt. If you have negative energy, you're projecting negative energy, and whether you believe it or not, people will feel that, and they're going to act like you or react to your negative vibe, if we want to call it that.
Totally.
So, yeah, put on a happy face, and it would change. It will change the world, which will change you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
that's why I
I
said the
think,
inner and outer are the same. It really,
hmm,
yeah, yeah.
it it really is. Sometimes I believe it takes that outer world to change the inner you. Um, that's what I think, and it's kind of like liking it to putting yourself in that better situation, which is external, which is going to make that internal feel better. If you put yourself into a bad situation, you're going to feel bad.
Yeah, totally. And uh, I would say that's also a learning experience too, right?
Mm. Oh,
Yeah, and
yes.
so our external and internal, our external can be our greatest teachers, really.
Yeah.
So like you said, if I keep putting myself in a situation that I do not like, then it's like up to me to really change that. And I'll give you just a practical example of a patient I had who's so wonderful. So she came to me with thyroid cancer, and young woman too, in her mid 20s. And she said, "Oh, Ann, stage 4 thyroid cancer. I'm going to die." And I was like, "Okay, is that what you want to do?" "Well, no, that's why I'm here." "Okay, good. So like step 1, she wants to live." Yes. That's always like that willingness to live is huge, is absolutely huge. The willingness to want to thrive is huge. And so I'm just going to take you on a little painted picture of her because she's so wonderful. She was living in an environment that had no sun, um, upper Canada. So I'm Canadian, so I'm just gonna laugh about that one because, like, I don't think we see the sun 4 months out of the year. But anyway, that's why I've become a snowbird, and getting down into the States in the winter. It's amazing. And she was eating, a pretty processed food diet. She was getting, let's say, about 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. At the time, she was working as a bartender. So she was into alcohol and so on. I'm just really painting you a picture of where she started.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the words of hers was, "I just feel so unfulfilled and depressed in my life." And she did come to me and said, "I have depression as well." And so she was on all these medications. And I said, "Look, I'm going to work with your family doctor on this," because basically she said, "Well, you have 6 months to live, right?" And everyone's heard these stories on the planet by now of like, okay, this person, and here we have another miracle story, but life is a miracle if you want it to be. And so what we did is we, cleaned up her diet, got her off alcohol. We actually got her off working those really late, crazy shifts as well. Shift work wasn't benefiting her. I said, what's your dream? She goes, "Oh, I've always wanted to go to Australia." And I said, "Okay, then go to Australia. It's bright, it's sunny, it's wonderful." And so she ended up going with a friend of hers. So that was important. The supportive friend was very important in this whole process of healing. Like we spoke about, that giving and receiving, that support, that safety and security, like having that is so important, and understanding that it'll be there for you no matter what. So she had her support system. Off they went to Australia, rented a camper van, and, basically drove, I think, the whole East Coast and then down the center of Australia, which is more desert-like.
Wow.
And so I said, "Look, you got to do this for yourself," and gave her all the tools she needed to heal. Now, we worked together for about 3 months prior to this, and her cancer had stopped growing, which was really good. Because, if it kept growing, then she wouldn't have been able to live. So we were saying, okay, the cancer cells have stopped replicating. You're creating change for yourself, which is amazing. But again, I thought, weather, environment, stress levels from how she was perceiving her stress, and also integration is big. So in order for her to integrate everything that we'd been doing, I almost needed her to like have a fresh start, and her personality in particular. Okay, so off she goes to Australia, adventurous young woman with her friends. They were eating fantastic food. They weren't drinking. They were in the sun every day. She told me when they drove through the outback, they didn't even have cell phone reception for like 4 days or something like that. So she didn't have the stress of anything, really. She's like, "I didn't hear from a doctor. I didn't." And she's like, "I liked it." Because every time she got a call from, a lab result, she would panic, right? And she's like, "I just didn't think about it for 4 or 5 days." And so over time, she spent about a month and a half over there and came back, and the cancer had started to heal itself, right? Mm-hmm. And she was down, by the time she got back, she was down to a classified stage 1. And now she's living with nothing at all.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think what I want people, like, miracles are real, okay? But like miracles and healing and understanding yourself and knowing your environment is even more real, and to put it into our reality. And you can create and recreate yourself at any moment. I think we're told and that we're taught in health, and I always thought it was this way too, that, I have the cancer DNA strand. And people are like, I'm going to get cancer. Okay, well, if you believe that, you will. But I would say to everyone, if you have that gene, you actually don't need to express it in your environment. And that's exactly what this young woman did. She's like, I'm going to choose to do something different. I'm going to, change loads of things about myself. We had to go into how she was even, creating emotions in her body and all this stuff. And I'm going to actually live a different me. And with that choice alone, you can heal anything about yourself. And that's the power of what I was talking about, epigenetics, through everything that you're living in your day. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, I can't heal this, and I'm going to say, I'm going to question that one, because I bet you can, and I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing now is everyone's coming saying, well, I have ADHD, I have, I'm slightly autistic, or, everyone's really self-diagnosing with all these things. And my answer to that is great. Let's work with it. Maybe it's a talent of yours. Maybe you're not in the right environment for yourself. Maybe you're not feeding yourself very well. And to have something like ADHD, maybe it means you're actually really creative and you're not in a creative environment, right? Like, these are all my questions. It's like, are you in the right environment for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything that you're saying is really hitting home with how these my thought process, how I used to and still do think about things. I always would use the term or say you are a product of your environment.
Yeah.
That's one. And then the other thing I want people to know, here again, I'm talking like a doctor.
Yeah,
which
Chuck,
I am not.
You are totally a pro now. Yeah, after this combo, totally a pro. Mm-hmm.
I would like to say for everybody that's out there, the audience, is give yourself patience. Allow yourself, be patient with yourself. We talk about being patient for other people, and we do our best to be patient with people. But we need to remember to be patient with ourselves as well.
Yes. Yeah. I love that you shared that, and thank you so much for adding that in. Oftentimes I get so excited, and even me, I forget about that. But yeah, life is a journey of patience and understanding and that gratitude. And you're right. If we go back to good old MJ, man in the mirror, like we gotta look for ourselves and give that to ourselves as well on a daily basis, for sure. Whether it's gratitude journaling, whether it's just going out and chatting with a friend, like however somebody wants to do it is totally up to them. But yeah, that patience is so important, for sure.
Yeah. Ann, can you remind the audience once again where they can go to get these resources of yours to find out more about themselves?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, we've grown so fast in the last 6 months. In fact, we've just been awarded a huge award in the US around the Best Self Transformation Program of 2024. So that was really big because I know it's working. I know the program's working and I know it's helping people, and that was the whole purpose of doing that. So people can, if they just want to start out and understand a little bit about themselves and the people that surround themselves, they can go to lifelift.live. We are finally starting social media, much to my demise.
What?
I know. It was my own. I'm not on social media for me, but now I have a team on it. So go team. I'm just going to really love them for that, and be grateful for their expertise.
We need to dive into why you were avoiding social media.
I know those stories, Chuck, so well. So well. I was actually kind of ripped apart in social media at some point. And I had to kind of overcome the fear of getting back out there, because there's haters out there, right? And
oh yeah,
and I was young when all that happened, and I didn't know how to handle it really. And now I'm at a point where I'm just like, whatever, people are gonna say what they want to say, and that's their choice. And I know me, and yeah, I had to probably overcome and get like a little bit of courage back, for sure, to get out on social. So yeah, that's it's growing. For sure. I think we just started our channels up like last month, so it's going to grow. And yeah, there's lots of goodies on the website right now is really what we're doing. And there'll be some events popping up that people can attend online, which I think is wonderful. And next year, 2025, we'll be doing some in-person stuff in the States. So there'll be a little bit of a roadshow going on. So yes,
excellent.
Stay tuned, everybody. I think Instagram and YouTube is where we're at most. So there's LifeLift.community on Insta. People can find my personal Instagram as well, Ann.Shivas, I believe it is. Sorry. and LifeLift on YouTube. I know that one for sure. This tells you how much I go on social, but yeah, I'm more focused on helping people and seeing people face to face. I really enjoy that. I enjoy those interactions, and I enjoy putting myself in that lane where I know it can make a difference. But I guess social media can help too. So there you go.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
I'll make sure that we get whatever social that we can find in the notes.
Thanks, Chuck.
But, and I just want to say thanks. This has really been helpful, thoughtful, and encouraging.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah. It was so great to meet you, and I'm so happy that we got to share this. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, Ann, were you okay with what we were able to cover?
100%. How about you?
Yeah.
Thanks
yeah.
for
Okay,
sharing.
I'm gonna hit the